The veepstakes ended yesterday. Minnesota Governor Tim Walz joining the Democratic ticket. Here to help us analyze the choice is political consultant John Daigle. Good morning, John.
Good morning, Ann.
So tell us what is at stake here. What is Kamala Harris's political calculation? Why did Walz get the nod?
Well, it's really interesting, and I thought it was a brilliant choice. I've worked with many candidates over the last 25 years, and one of the hardest things that any new politician or new elected official has to learn is that almost every decision you make makes some people happy and others unhappy. I think in this situation, you had after Harris took over from Biden, you really had a lot of people on the Democratic side worried about the fact that we had obviously picked up the party had picked up progressives and minorities and youth, but it wasn't at the sacrifice of blue collar and labor and unions. And I think the Waltz pick was a brilliant choice because it it he's a progressive and he's liked by progressives, but he's also going to be very effective with those blue wall states, Wisconsin, Michigan, Pennsylvania, with union and labor in those states. He's very friendly with those groups. So I think in that respect, whereas on the Republican side, the J.D. Vance pick did not really appeal to a different group other than the ones that Trump already had. On the Democratic side, you have a vice president pick that really does balance the ticket and helps her attract some voters that party may have lost when they switched from Biden to Harris.
I want to ask you about tone as well, because Kamala Harris has projected a somewhat joyful warrior position, I think is how she likes to see herself. Tim Walz was the creator of this kind of weird description of the Republican Party that has caught on as a mocking but not um, angry tone for the Democrats in terms of taking on Donald Trump and J.D. Vance.
Yeah, and then from a messaging standpoint, it is actually been very effective. And as you said, we saw how quickly that messaging line of normal versus weird has taken off. The Republicans have tried to switch that and play it, but it's not really landed very effectively. It's certainly not as effective as it has been working for the last week or two on the Democratic side. It's a messaging that is, much more easy for the normal person to understand versus, memes or labels like fascists or stuff like that. And that's why it's powerful in its simplicity. And I think that is very much what Waltz is going to bring to that ticket, which is the ability to speak to the common man, the blue collar worker, average people in their language, which is what he has seemed to do very well in winning some seats that were not, hard Democratic seats. He's been able to speak to Republicans and Democrats. And the other big thing he does, which Vance doesn't seem to do, is go after those independents, which is a huge block of voters in this race who probably will decide this election. And I think the one thing he brings to that ticket, which is an appeal to independents who are turned off by most of today's politics, but will enjoy his, common sense, no nonsense, working man kind of style on the campaign.
What about some vulnerabilities that he may have? What are the things that Republicans are going to attempt to attack him on?
Yeah, well, you can watch right now that they're trying to throw a few things at him, see what sticks, and it's probably going to take a while for them to figure out exactly what is the strongest attack. They're certainly going to attack him on what is perceived as a slow response to the riots following George Floyd's murder in Minnesota. There's been some scandals that he's taken responsibility for. There was a multi-million-dollar scandal in terms of after the COVID with some organizations in Minnesota that got relief money and turned out to use it fraudulently, which he took responsibility for. Those things probably won't be, the ultimate attack. For the Trump Vance team, they're going to have to come back to trying to paint him in some way, which will be very hard, but try to paint him as a leftist, radical, liberal. Those are the labels that will probably be most effective, but it's going to be difficult with him having, born and raised in rural Nebraska and his style in general. It's going to be hard to paint him as a radical liberal.
Right. And he's talked about his evolution on something like guns, where he used to be A+ with the NRA, and now he's a steady F.
Yeah, I mean, he's got a voting record. He's got stuff he can talk about with moderates and with Republicans, and he's also got a really strong voting record that will appeal to progressives on stuff like abortion rights, gun control, support for children, and meals programs. He can really talk to almost any audience in a way that almost anybody, Trump or Harris, can't do.
Well, it's an interesting race. It's getting more interesting all the time. And we will, of course, be talking to you in the weeks and months ahead, John Daigle, about this very thing, including on primary night on August
Yeah,
20th.
looking forward to that.
All right. Same here, John. John Daigle, appreciate it.